Song, wasn't it? Oh, what a great message there. Listen, I have the privilege this morning of introducing a friend of mine. Chris and I haven't worked closely together, but he's been a friend as long as he's been in the Baptist General Convention of Oklahoma, and he does great things. He's been with the BGCO for 15 years, and today holds incredible titles like Emerging Generation Specialist, and that in and of itself is a great opportunity, and also oversees all the Baptist Collegiate Ministry work here in the state of Oklahoma. So Chris is going to come share with you some things, and we are excited to have him with us today. Please give him your attention. Chris, thanks for coming.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it. I always like it when people clap before I speak because they never do afterwards. So that's a good start. No, I'm excited to be here this morning, and my background, I'm Okie. The only place I've ever lived. About 3 years we moved to Chicago, 2nd to 5th grade, and we got to move back, and I was so excited. All my friends, though, were like, "You're moving to Oklahoma?" And I said, "Yeah, it's great." And they're like, "It's the Dust Bowl capital of the world." And I said, "Well, you need to come look at it." And because Chicago was dirty. But that's all I wanted to do. I was so excited to get back. My background really is in student ministry. I remember coming down forward on a Sunday morning when I was about 20 years old and finally surrendering the ministry. God called me to the ministry when I was 12, and I thought it over for a few years and made that public when I was 20. And I remember a lady coming by and saying, "You're going to do so good with those young people." And I said, "Well, you know, the one thing I'm really not interested in doing is youth ministry." And a year later, God called me to a church as a youth pastor, and 28 years later, I kind of transitioned from youth ministry to young adult work, and so it's been a great run. I was a youth pastor for about 18 years, and then 10 years at the convention. I worked traveling the state, training students how to share their faith on a public school campus. We call them fish clubs, and we did trainings on those, and then helped coordinate See You at the Pole. Anything that we could do to get the gospel into a middle school or high school, that's what we did. Towards the end of 2007, my boss, my supervisor at the time, who's now my boss again, a guy named Alan Quigley, he came to me and he said, I haven't really talked to anybody about this. He said, but there's a position I'd like to create. And it's really, we're not sure what to call it yet, but it's really figuring out what's going on in the life of young adults. Now, I want to tell you this. You have something about 95% of the churches in Oklahoma do not have, and that's young adults. Most of the churches I go to, there are there's some children, there's some youth, and then there's people 45 and above, and there's nobody in that middle gap. And so most of the conferences I go to, and we'll talk about that work in just a little bit, but most of the places I go are trying to help churches figure out how to attract even 1 or 2 or 3 young adults just to get started. You guys are obviously, God's doing some great things here. You're way ahead of the curve for most of churches, not just Baptist churches, but churches in Oklahoma. So the idea was, let's figure out what's happening in the young adults world and figure out how our churches can connect with that. So in 2008, we began that process, and we'll share just a little bit about that in a minute. But I want to back up just a little bit. I want to talk about, and just real quickly, let me remind you of the thing that really drives us as Southern Baptists, and that's Matthew 28, 19 and 20. We refer to that as the what? Great Commission. Listen to the words again. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. Now, that's really great words, but the thing that makes these words even more significant is the time period in which they're spoken. This is Jesus after the resurrection, before the ascension. This is Jesus in that small period of time where he gets to pour into his disciples who had heard all these teachings, but finally they make sense. Now they understand the kind of kingdom he's going to build. Now they understand how his life is. Now they understand he has the power over death. And so in this time he's saying, this is what I want you to do with the rest of your life. Now these guys never had to wake up in the morning and wonder, I wonder what I'm supposed to do today. Jesus laid it out for them. Now some of them did different things to make money, to earn a living. But they knew as the followers of Jesus Christ that their goal was to get the story, to tell the story, the Jesus story, get it out there. So the Spirit of God, Jesus said, no one comes to me unless the Father first calls them. They knew that if they could get the story out there, the Spirit of God could use that story to change lives in dramatic ways. And so that was their goal. And then Jesus told them, once they come to know me, then you baptize them, and then you teach them everything I've taught you. That's really still the goal, isn't it? It's who we are. It's what draws us together and brings a common purpose. And because as Southern Baptists, our churches, we're pretty fiercely independent, aren't we? We like to do things our own way, call our own shots. But the one thing that through history has pulled us together has been this. We want to reach the world. We want to make a difference. We want to get this story out there so the Spirit of God can use that story to change lives and to make a difference. Romans 10:13 says this. It says, for everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Now we're going to do a third grade math problem, which scares me and other people like me. But I think we can do this. According to that promise, for everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved, if 10 people pray to receive Christ, how many of those 10 would actually become Christians? Not 10. That's not rocket science, isn't it? I saw a couple guys going, 3. Oh, just forget it. Yeah, it's 10. It's not that we're supposed to go out and try and figure out who's qualified. We are to be a part of the miraculous account of the miraculous story that God started so long ago, to tell the story out there and to see him call people to himself that sometimes we think, I thought they were so close. Sometimes in the lives of people we thought, I never, ever thought in my wildest dreams or imagine they would ever care about church or God or anything. And yet that's what God does. And so our goal as individuals, as Christ followers, our goal as a congregation is to get this story out there. Now, one of the great challenges is this. In fact, I'll just ask you this. If you know someone who just, you could have inflatable games, free pizza, JoJo the one-eyed clown juggling softballs, and you could have it at your church, and you could invite this person, you say, you know what, they still wouldn't come. If you know people like that, raise your hand. They just have no interest in ever attending church. Okay? Plus, just raise your hand, they'll get your heart going again. And you know what we're finding? More and more and more people in our culture, in our society, they just don't have a general interest in church. And some of them have had a bad experience and won't come, but larger and larger numbers, we're just not on their radar screen, especially in the world of young adults. It's not that they don't like church, they just have other things they would rather do. And so we're seeing larger and larger numbers of people not attending churches. While your church continues to do well, there's still a lot of people in this community that aren't here this morning. In fact, they're not in anybody's church. They're just, the whole spiritual thing is not part of what they're going to. And so we can really adopt one of two attitudes. One is this. We can say, well, we did a good job. We did a great job at our churches. Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday nights. And I don't think we have to apologize for the programs we've done. We do a great job of telling the story, have the special events, making sure that when people come here, they get to hear the specific story of who Jesus is. And we could just say, well, if they just choose their whole life to never go to church, never hear that story, and they die and go to hell, it's their fault. That doesn't even sound good, does it? There's another attitude, and it's this. We're going to continue to do a great job inside the four walls of our churches. But you know what? The other thing is we're going to make sure that we get the story of who Jesus is out into the world where those people live. So that miraculous story can happen and can change lives. The Spirit of God can use that story to change lives all around this community. That's Jesus, isn't it? That's who we are. That's who we want to be. Now, if we adopt that, let's say just this church, we say, you know what, we're going to do this as a church. We can do that and we're going to be limited, aren't we? I mean, we could say, all right, we're going to reach all of Warner. Pretty big goal. You can say, well, you know what, we're going to reach all this county. Maybe 2 of the counties surrounding it. It would be pretty big, wouldn't it? And if you accomplish that, it would be incredible. But the world's bigger than that, isn't it? We say, okay, well, then we need to reach Oklahoma from this church. It'd be tough, wouldn't it? It was, well, you know what, but the United States is bigger than just Oklahoma. Now, that's hard for me to believe. The rest of them are wrong. But I have seen on a map that the world is bigger than Oklahoma. Well, okay, well, then let's try, as a church, let's try meet the United States. How about North America? How about the world? Years and years ago, in fact, this is how churches used to do it. It's called societal missions. And basically, one church would kind of work towards getting their missionaries and go out and try and focus on different things. And a long time ago, so a group of people came together and said, there's got to be a better way. And said, what if all of our churches gave a portion of what they gathered, and we pooled all that together? And they called it the Cooperative Program. And that's what we as Southern Baptists, that is the one thing that has always held us together, the 2 things, our passion to reach the world and a great strategy for doing it. And that's how it works. The Cooperative Program is simply every time you put $1 in the plate, a portion of that your church sends to the Southern Baptist Convention, which we then send. We keep a portion of that, then we send a portion of that to the International Mission Board, which used to be called the Forward Mission Board. We send a portion of that to the North American Mission Board, which used to be called the Home Mission Board. In fact, I was a North American Mission Board employee for about 12 years when I was doing the youth ministry things, and it was a great opportunity for me to be able to go and spend all of my time doing the ministry that God called me, rather than going out church to church trying to raise enough funds so that I could spend 40% of my time doing that ministry. It's a great benefit for us to be able to work together, because all the churches across Oklahoma and across the United States, Southern Baptist churches that pull together for the cooperative program, we create a huge amount of funds that can be used for great ministries. So this morning, here's what I want to do. I just want to tell you some of the stories, some of the things that you have already been a part of that you might not have realized. So, stories you might not have heard till you got to heaven, and you will get to hear them when you get to heaven, but I thought I'd give you a preview. Is that all right? It's kind of like you're not going to see the whole movie, you're just going to see the 2-minute teaser. Well, that's what we're going to do this morning. And so just relax. I want to tell you just a few of the things that are going on. I will tell you, we talk about the International Mission Board and the North American Mission Board. When I was doing the campus ministry job, I had a friend of mine in another denomination who did the exact same job as me. The difference between him and me was he spent about 60% of his time going church to church to church, telling his story and asking them to support him, which meant about 40% of his time was spent actually out doing the job. The great thing that I got to do was, like I said a minute ago, 100% of my time was spent doing the job that God called me to do. You know what one of the great things was? I would meet with students, and we promoted fish clubs and different strategies at all the camps at KBA and at Falls Creek and any youth camp that we could do. And so then I would get calls when the summer was over with, and the youth pastor would generally say, okay, I've got 3 kids that are going to kill me if you don't come do a training, because they want to do this at their school. And then they would always say this, but here's the deal. We're kind of a small church. How much does this cost? You know what I got to tell them? And by the way, I would travel about 32,000 miles a year in Oklahoma, all in Oklahoma, just doing trainings. You know what I got to tell them? I got to say it's free. It doesn't cost you anything, because all the churches in Oklahoma have already gotten together, and they provided the funds for this to be able to happen. And so we were able to start evangelistic campus clubs all across our state because of the things that were happening, because of the cooperative, because you were doing some things. You may not have even known it. At See at the Pole, we had this vision. We thought, wouldn't it be great if at See You at the Pole, we've already got students that are gathering around phone poles. Let me back that up. Gathering around flag poles and praying for their school, praying for their friends. Wouldn't it be incredible if that night they got to invite those same friends to a rally, to a service where they got to hear the story of who Jesus was. And so we began to help associations to take some of the money that you gave and say, okay, we're going to help associations, and we're going to provide them an amount of money that if they will hold one of these rallies, we'll help support it. And we'd start off, we had probably 21, 22 associations that start. If I remember last year, they had close to 30 associations, but there were over 10,000 students gathered at the See at the Pole rallies that were happening that night all across Oklahoma. Okay? You got to be a part of that. All across Oklahoma, the story of Jesus was told to students who had been prayed for that morning. We got to see students come to know Christ because of the investment that you already made. It's exciting. It was those kind of things that we make. And that's one of the great benefits of our international missionaries, our North American missionaries. They get to go do the work that God has called them to do. And you're a part of all those stories that are happening. Let me tell you some of the things that are happening in Oklahoma, even more personal. We went actually Wednesday as a convention. We have meetings about once a month or so. And on this one, we met at the Baptist Retirement Village Center, which you and I help support in part through our cooperative giving. I don't know. When I was a youth pastor, I used to take my students. We would go to a nursing home, a retirement center, and we would have our students just walk up the hall, knock on the door, ask if they could come in, and if people said yes, then they would come in and they'd just talk. We taught them how to just talk about their life, ask them questions, find out about where they grew up. They just talked. It was interesting. Most of the people that, when they came back, we talked to our students, say, well, tell me what you found out. They say, there are pictures of their family, but they said their family they live too far away. They don't hardly ever get to come. Sometimes the smell was something that would be commented on. Mostly we just remember wasn't a place that we were excited about going. And everybody was happy we just got to visit. And when I would ask my students, how many of you are excited about, in fact, you're going to put a financial plan so that you can make sure and go back there and live? None of them. Got to walk through the Baptist Retirement Village Center the other day, and you know what? It smells great. It's clean. It's a great environment. But here's the interesting thing. No one goes there just to kind of sit around and wait till the end. When they go there, one of the very first things that they talk to them about is about, okay, tell us about your life story. What's been going on up to this point? What do you feel like God has called you to do in the next few years? And they help connect them with a ministry, a passion, something that they can do that will help promote the kingdom and help them live out their Christian faith in that final phase of their life. It is a great, great environment. And I remember just thinking, I am so glad that at Southern Baptist we get to be a part of something like this, something that extends life in a great environment, in a great way, and you get to be a part of that. We have a great chaplaincy ministry. I don't know if y'all know this or not, but we have chaplains that we in fact, in Oklahoma, we train more volunteer chaplains than any other state in the United States. And here's why. We have chaplains that will go into those places that most people don't want to go. Okay, we are very heavy in chaplaincy in prisons, in our jail system, in county jails, city jails. We want to make sure that we have trained people that can go in and sit down and stand face to face with people that say, listen, I know most people will look at you and say, man, we just want those people put away. Okay? We want you separated from us. But we want you to know that no matter where you are in your life, no matter what you've done, there's a God that can change your life and can change your heart. And I am so excited that you and I are a part of doing that. We have chaplains everywhere. One of the great things that we've done is about 3 years ago, a guy named Tom Beto began what we call oil field chaplaincy. Tom has a background in the oil field, and one of the things, it's a pretty close system. How many people here are connected to oil field at all? Yeah. A couple, okay. I was going to say, good, stop the fracking because my house is shaking. But here's one of the exciting things. It's a pretty closed system, and one of the things Tom said is, a disaster can happen on a rig, and you don't hear about it on the news. And it's covered up. It's closed. It's a closed family deal. They deal with it and take care of it. He said, but the problem is, many of these guys see these disasters, and they're pretty traumatic, and there's nobody there to help take care of it. And so the alcoholism, the drug abuse can come in just to help them try and figure out, okay, how do I handle with what I just saw? And so he's trained chaplains to be able to, within about 30 minutes of a disaster, to be on that rig, and before that guy's shift is over, that chaplain's able to sit down and kind of walk these guys through some things of how to handle some things, some pretty traumatic things that they were a part of that they just got to see. And it is a great, great ministry. By the way, it's a ministry and it's a field that we weren't penetrating very much before. There weren't a lot of these guys working the rigs who were in churches on Sunday mornings. And so this is one other time where as Southern Baptists, instead of waiting for them to come to us, we have gone to them. And it has made a huge difference in the world. And that continues just to grow and grow. Disaster relief. Anybody here know Sam Porter? Sam Porter, he's the disaster relief guy. Now, I can't really trace this back, but I don't remember. There are way more disasters after Sam took the job. Okay? I'm just saying. It seems like things were pretty calm before then, and then all of a sudden Sam Porter walked in and the world fell apart. Thankfully he was there, though, because we have a presence. Disaster relief has gone to an incredible new level. We have a presence on every local disaster. We've been in Indonesia. We've been in everywhere in the world something is happening. I promise you, Southern Baptists are there. Now, here's what you won't see. You won't see us in front of the cameras. You won't see us taking the credit. There are other organizations we let step forward and do that. But I promise you, we are in the background. Over and over and over. I can tell you stories of places like there was a thing in Oklahoma City where they were bringing thousands of people in, and it was incredibly disorganized. And then our food truck rolled in, and one of the policemen said, "Okay, it'll be okay now." He said, "The Baptists are here." Why? Because we know how to do it, and we do it well. We got mud out crews that'll go in and help people clean their house out. We got people that'll come in. I love the chainsaw crews. In fact, we've trained we're in the process of training in our BCMs, training students how to work on these chainsaw crews. And there's something about walking up to a house. I don't know if you've ever had a tree drop on your house. It's expensive to get it off. Okay, and so to have somebody come up to your door and say, "Listen, we want to know if you would like for us to take this tree off your house." The question always again is what? How much is it going to cost? Yeah. And so when a crew says, "It's not going to cost you anything, we'll drag it down, we'll cut it down, we'll drag it all the curb, we'll help cover the roof, whatever you need to do to get you by this next point." And when they're allowed to do that, and people watch how hard they work, and they'll always ask the question, "Why are you doing this? Well, why would you do this?" There are two things. When you actually serve somebody, it's a great opportunity to be able to share the gospel. And when you're holding a chainsaw, there's just something that captures the attention. It's when we serve people, we get outside the four walls of our church, and we take the love of Jesus to the people who need it at a time when they really, really are receptive and ready to listen. We are still cleaning up after the Moore and the Shawnee disasters. Something you may not know is, again, it's pretty quiet, but between oilfield chaplaincy and disaster relief, something happened. There were so many people that 3 and 4 months after the Moore tornado, they were living with their family in tents. I mean, in the middle of the winter. These are people that still had nowhere to live. And so when we found that out, one of the things that Sam and Tom started doing was they started going to the oil companies and said, "You know, the oil companies will have a trailer, usually kind of a trailer home, and they'll drop it on the site. And they have a lot of those, rather than just pull them out, they have a lot of those left over." And so we worked out a deal to be able to buy those from the oil company, come in, have volunteer people go all the way through them, make them into a livable home, drop them on a site for these people who don't have a home, hand them the keys, and say, "This is because God loves you. We know you've gone through something really tragic, but we want you to know as Southern Baptists, we love you." And by the way, we've kind of really looked for people who don't go to church. We really look for those people that don't have a church background, that don't normally, and we've said, "Listen, we want to make sure you understand God loves you and He provides for your needs physically, but He can also provide for them spiritually." And that has been happening for the last year and a half, and it continues to happen. And it wouldn't happen if we weren't all working together, your church, my church, all the churches in Oklahoma, working together for the cooperative program. There are great stories, great things that are happening. Boys Ranch Town, the children's home, you hear great stories about those. I've been a part of 2 different churches where in the youth group, one of the homes would bring their students to our youth group. And it's just interesting watching those kids, especially watching some of them come in, because generally you don't go to Boys Ranch Town because your life's going well. Okay? It's because there's some struggle somewhere in their life. And so many of those young men come in, and they've had to endure and survive some pretty tough situations. And they come in pretty hard. They come in, they've figured out how to live life, and that's you fight for everything you get. And it's interesting to watch these guys come in and see the love of God just slowly begin to permeate their life, and they slowly just begin to change. My wife and I were, we shop at only the most exotic places. We were at Walmart one day, and we were actually on our way up to register, and one of these young men who had been in the church that we were in, and his new wife, who was also in that church, they've been married about 6 months, and I don't know if he was working oil rig or something, but you could tell he just got off work, and he was a bit soiled. But there he was doing what every big, tough young guy would do. But he was behind his wife pushing the cart. And I thought, yeah, you're a tough guy. It happened to the best of us. And but as they were coming through, we stopped and just talked a little bit. In a short amount of time, they told us all their plans, dreams, they painted a beautiful picture of all the things they hoped would happen in their life. And all I could remember and think was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that wouldn't have been a story from this guy. Not at all. And I thank God for things like the Boys Ranch Town, for the Baptist Children's Home, that a young man like this could have a great future. That someone could come along and bring him in and change his life. Because you see, he'll change not only his life, but he'll change the history of his family. The heritage, the things that he would have passed on, he'll no longer pass on to his kids. He'll pass on godly things, good things, positive things. And that's because you and I help go together through the cooperative program to help these stories. See, the cooperative program it's not just a phrase. It's stories. It's people. It's real. It's life on life. It's a way that we can consistently make a difference in people's lives. Baptist Collegiate Ministry. How many people are ever part of BCM or BSU? Yeah, the number of times I hear, well, it's BSU and it'll never be anything else. Well, let me tell you something. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's a great thing. Incredible stories. I was actually doing an interim at a church in Oklahoma City, and when I took the added responsibility of BCMs, and so I was telling the guys, I said, I'm going to be gone on some Wednesday nights. And they said, now, what is this BCM thing? I said, well, you may remember it as BSU. Immediately, one of the guys, he's in his 60s, he said, BSU saved my life. He said, I love the BSU. And they just, story after story after story. And I hear that all across Oklahoma, is the reality of how the collegiate ministry had changed people's lives at a critical time. I said, man, I got to this campus, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know what was going on. All of a sudden, I found this group of people that man, just took me in. It was a community. Or I hear this story. Man, I didn't know anything about God. I didn't grow up in church. And all of a sudden, I met this guy in my dorm. And he took me to this thing called the BCM. And man, it was like, I'd never seen anything like that before. And I got saved at the BCM. And then I met my wife. I hear that a lot, by the way. Evidently, it's a pretty good shopping place. And they said, I met my wife there, and I'm telling you, to this day, I love the BCM because it's changed my life. Here's what I loved about BCM, long before I was ever the director of it. I would hear the vision. I would hear these guys talk, and I'd go to different campuses. I love the fact that they didn't have this, huddle mentality. Well, let's just get all the Christian kids together and make sure they don't drink, okay? Let's just make sure they're not bad while they're in college. It was this. Hey, let's pull every Christian student we can get together, and let's continue to disciple them. Let's continue to help them grow in the next phase of their life. And let's make sure that they can be lights in dark places on this campus. Let's get the story of Jesus across this campus as much as we can. We have a theme. It goes like this. It says, every campus, every life. Our goal would be to touch every life on every college or collegiate or university campus in Oklahoma. It's a huge task. But that's our goal. That's where we're shooting for. And our goal is to be light in dark places, because this is a great time to connect with young adults. Part of my job is Baptist Collegiate Ministry. Part of my job is helping churches with their college ministry. And so we're kind of developing what we would call Oklahoma Collegiate Ministries, which would be church ministries and Baptist and BCMs kind of working together to do some great things. We did a conference 2 weeks ago, and we call it Momentum. It's kind of a back-to-school conference for college students, for college-age students, so for church and BCMs. Had about 700 students there. What a great event. Had great worship time, but then we had some breakouts, training on specific things. Here's how you can be a light in dark places. We'll do a retreat for the first time in a lot of years, April 10, 11, and 12 at Falls Creek. And so that will be for college-age church people and BCMs. It'll be at Falls Creek. It's going to be a great, great event. And we're excited that we can start making a difference really across our state in this group. How are we doing on time? Oh my goodness. Let me tell you the last stories then. About in 2008, I told you, we tried to figure out what's going on with young adults. And I was getting calls from pastors who were saying, I'd been in the job like 2 months. Pastor called me, said, so what have you found out so far? I said, well, I found out I don't know as much as I thought. He said, well, send me anything you got. He said, my daughter just got home from a 2-year mission trip. Said, I can't get her to go to church. I said, well, did she have a bad experience? He said, no, she loved it. I said, was she mad at God? No, she loves God. She doesn't think our church will help her follow Jesus the way the New Testament says. You know, that actually scared me. Because the impression when I first went in, there were two. One was that, well, we're just kind of in this cycle where young adults will, they kind of get away when they go to college, and then they get married, and they come back when they have kids. What we are finding is that this statement I just said was more true than the other. And it was this young adults were sitting there saying, hey, our church just wants to sit and listen. We want to go do something. We want to make a difference in the world. And we look at our church and we just don't think they're going to do that, and so we're going to find someone who does. And we were losing great young adults. And so that was the first thing. Then the second thing that I thought was going to happen, I thought we're going to have to develop the most incredible apps, the most incredible technological stuff. You know what I found out? Apple, IBM. There's some people out there who do really, really good stuff, and we can't compete with them. And by the way, we don't need to. Thankfully, before we spent any money trying to do that, we did some research. I'd read all the national research on young adult. Then we did one in Oklahoma in 2009. We want to know what do Oklahoma young adults think. You know what we found out? There are about 3 things that young adults really, really want. They want community. They want relationships. They want somebody who will care for them. We could go and I do long conferences on this. And in fact, I brought a couple of books. We've written two resources that we've written. This one really about young adult culture, kind of how they think, the way they think, why they do. This one is about, again, has some young adult culture. This blue one has, I think, the two most influential factors that help young adults think, change their worldview, or shape their worldview. And then also how to do Sunday school and small group. And these are either $10 a piece or they're free. I would go for free if I were you. But I brought about half a dozen each, left them down front if you'd like these afterwards. But these are some of the resources. We found out they want relationship. They want someone who will come alongside them and live life with them and care about them. Young adults are typically, by the way, they have a very different worldview than us, and we could talk about that for a while, but it's because of the environment that we created for them. Okay, all they did was grow up in it. And so we've got some young adults that are very, very confident, have a lot of, they've been told their whole life, you're very, very special. And by the way, if you tell somebody they're special their whole life, they eventually begin to believe what? Special, yeah. How many youngest children in here? No matter what age you are, youngest child. Yeah, y'all lived in the same thing too. They have a great amount of confidence, great amount of information because of the internet. And yet, their ability to make decisions is challenged. Okay? You think about this. If your entire life, see, in my age group, typically if we're going to go through learning something, it was an environment like this. Someone, a quote expert would stand up, would speak, we'd take notes, but if you wanted to fact check them, you had to go home to the World Book Encyclopedia or go to the library. I did not spend a lot of time in the library. It smelled so much like books. And this generation is different. This generation, for every person that speaks, they can get on their phone and in 5 minutes find 3 people with the same amount of degrees or more who will disagree with everything this person says, or at least part of what they say. They are saturated with tons of differing opinions. And so what we found is, one of the times, especially at a time at a life 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, at this time of life where they're really making some big decisions, they have so much information coming at them. What they really need is somebody that cares about them. Will sit down, have a relationship, and say, well, let me tell you, let me just listen to you. Just tell me your story and help them kind of work through some things. Because more often than not, they're going to go with the person who says, well, here's what I think I would do. Here's my advice. They're most often going to go with the person who actually has invested time in them, who sees value in them and spends time with them. Well, guess what? We can do that, can't we? We don't have to create an app to do that. We have to be nice. By the way, guess what else? They want somebody to walk along life with, not someone who will tell them what to do. Okay? So we have to change the way we do it a little bit. You know what we found out? I teach conferences now on listening skills. Now that sounds silly. You know what we found out? Most of us don't listen. Most of us one-up each other. You tell a story, then I tell one, then you tell one, then I would tell, and we either run out of time or somebody tells a story that's so outlandish, the other one goes, you win. We've learned how, with young adults especially, that if we will actually listen to them, hear what they say, ask a good question from what you just heard, a relationship will happen incredibly fast. As we've been teaching our church, and by the way, guess what we found out? It works with anybody. Because we live in a world where everybody's speaking, hardly anybody's really listening. If you will slow down enough to make the other person more important than you, and listen to them, value who they are. The great theologian Mr. Rogers said this: it's possible to learn to love every person once you've heard their story. When we become a people that listen, genuinely listen, God opens our hearts up to other people. We hear their story, and we see the journey that He's put them on, and we put ourselves in an opportunity where we can now be able to be an influence in their life. These are all the kind of things that we're doing, all the things that you're a part of that you might not have heard the story for a long, long time. But these are the things that, through the cooperative program, the lives that are being changed, the ministries that are happening. There are so many more. You're ready for me to quit now, and so I'm going to. But we could go for hours just talking about stories of ministries and things that you're helping fund, that you're changing lives, and you don't know it. But I want you to know this: the cooperative program is helping do that, and so thank you. I came this morning to say thank you, to tell you the stories and say thank you for being a faithful church. Thank you for when some other churches are saying, well, maybe we want to do it a different way. Your church has said, no, let's be a part of a bigger picture. Let's not focus just on ourselves. Let's touch people that we may never see. Let's change lives all around the world. And let me just close with this. God's changing lives hasn't stopped. It didn't just happen in the Old Testament. It didn't happen in the New Testament. It didn't just happen around the world. It happens today. It happens in Warner. It happens here. And it happens like this. There are times where the Spirit of God will touch your heart, whisper in your ear, and say, I want you to be my son. I want you to be my daughter. And it'll be unlike anything you've ever experienced before. And without being able to rationalize in your head, there's this part that you just know, man, this is bigger than me. Well, that's God. That's God drawing you to the reason you were born, to the purpose in your life. And maybe this morning for the first, maybe you've done church for a long time, but this morning, even though we've talked about stories of other people, maybe this morning, because you were in this miraculous place, the Spirit of God has touched your heart, or He's been doing it for a while. Maybe this is the morning that you say, you know what, I want to be a part of that. Not just a part of other people's stories. I want to be a part of that God story. So this morning, when your pastor comes in a moment, maybe it's time that you give your heart to Christ. Maybe it's time that God's called you to missions, to do something. Maybe it's time He's calling you to something bigger than you could have ever imagined, and it has scared you to death. But I'm telling you, the greatest thing you can do is to follow God's will, His purpose for your life. Pastor.
Aren't you glad Paul's moving around better and better and better, and God's answering our prayers there? Let me just share, I know that you could possibly get out a hair bit early today. I'm not going to try to ruin that, all right? Listen, Chris, thank you for blessing us with that message. I'll tell you what, I don't know about you, and you know my belief on this. I'm a Christ follower first. I believe Jesus Christ is the person I identify with the most. And I'm going to tell you boldly today that I'm thankful that, secondly, I'm a Baptist. And from the things that Chris shared today, you ought to be proud. If you belong to our faith, you ought to be proud of that. Let me. Some of you may be saying, well, how do we give to this cooperative program thing? I want to give to that. I'm excited about that. What Chris shared, man, that's investing in lives. I want to be a part of that. Can I tell you something? That you already get a chance to do that every time you give. Some of you are still working on that. Some of you are still working with God on whether you should give or how much you should give. We believe you should tithe according to how God lays that on your heart. But here's what we do as a church with the money you give. All the money that's given into the plate that goes to budget, all right? That means it's not designated for handbells. It's not designated for missions. It's not designated for something. Every dollar that goes into the plate in this church that's just budget, we give 10% of every dollar, all right? Somebody tell me, if it's $1, how much are we giving? A dime. We're giving a dime. Every time you give $1, we give a dime to the cooperative program to fund these ministries. And Chris didn't even begin to open the lid on all the ministries that the cooperative program touches. So you hear us say it's important to give because we believe that's an obedience thing. I think you now understand why it's important to give. If you just give $10 a week or $25 a week, that's what God lays on your heart. Guess what? 10% of that every month goes to a cooperative program. And we're proud to be Southern Baptists, and we're proud to give. And I will just say, I'm not a math wizard. I'm kind of like you, Chris, man. Some of that math's tough. But there's this cool thing that the more you give, we still give 10%. Isn't that cool? So I want to encourage you to be a part of that. He mentioned disaster relief training. You hear Bob Geckler sharing that a lot. Now you know all the things that happen with that. Be a part of that. When we mention that again, sign up, go to those training, go to that training, get certified, and be a part of that. Last thing is this, and Blaine will come share some announcements with you. Next week is Back to Church Sunday. What is that? I come to church every Sunday. You're right, you do. But you get an opportunity, and someone just nationwide picked a date on the calendar in September and called it Back to Church Sunday. It's nothing more than a catalyst to get you to do what we ought to be doing all the time, and that's inviting those to come to know Jesus, to come to our church. Just come check us out. So I'm going to give you a 3-2-1 challenge, okay? Everyone ready for 3-2-1? Say 3-2-1. All right, some of you are. All right. Contact 3 people this week. Text, phone, call them. Contact 3 people this week and say, hey, next week we're having a thing called Back to Church Sunday, and I'm trying to get the most people there, so I don't care what your method is. Invite 3 people to church next week. That's 3. 2, face-to-face, look at someone and say, look, I want to invite you to church this week. Would you just come? We start at 11 o'clock. It's really relaxed. You don't have to dress up. So 3 people get a call or a contact, 2 people get a face-to-face, and then what's the one? Even offer to bring someone. Can you do the 3-2-1 challenge? I think you can. Call 3, face-to-face with 2, even offer 1. I'll come pick you up. I want you to sit by me. By the way, if you invite someone to come to church, it's kind of cool if you come to church so you can actually sit with them because you invited them. All right? So don't sleep in next week, all right? Last thing is this, mission team meeting today. Very important that we meet, all right? 5:30 today. Reminder of who's on mission team. Ronnie Ellis, Bob Geckler, Mike Bales, Noanna Anderson, Barbara Smithson, Stacy Seabolt, Vicki Ward, Jack Sales, Carla Rowe, Judy Hale. How do I get on that mission team? You filled out a form last year that said these are the teams I want to serve on, all right? So we need to meet with all those I just called off and anyone else that wants to be a part of our mission team at 5:30 today. Blaine, I'm sorry if I stole any of your thunder. Get up here, man. I'm going to ask Chris to stand back at the back with me as you leave today. If you go out that door, do something crazy and go by and give him a hand of fellowship. Would you please?
All right, if you have a bulletin, just a few announcements before we are dismissed this morning. Also today will be a money counters meeting, 5:30 in the office, so money counters. You might keep that in mind. Lots of stuff going on in September. See you at the poll, students. I'm excited about that. Adults, come join us around the flagpole at Warner High School. That's going to be a great thing. Don't forget, 30-Day Challenge is going to soon begin, and we'll be talking more and more about that. Smith & Go wedding coming up. Lots going on in September. If you look inside your bulletin real quickly, just something I want to hit on. Funds are needed to support the backpack program. 111 students each week, and it continues to grow. So if you want to give toward the backpack program, I know that is a great thing. Students are in need of those supplies and those resources, so you might keep that in mind and in your prayers. All right, if nothing else, Brother Paul. All right, let's stand and we'll be dismissed with a final prayer for this morning. God, we just thank you so much, Lord, just for the opportunity to be in your house this morning. And God, we thank you for the word that we've heard from Chris, and God, just the vision and the inspiration behind the cooperative program. And Lord, I pray that it would just be on our hearts, God, just to want to reach the world, just to want to reach those who are lost, those who have yet to place their faith and trust in Jesus as their Lord and Savior. And God, I pray that as we move forward, God, that we would come together as a church and just to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. God, that's what you've called us to do. And God, I pray that each and every one of us, God, would just see the need for that as we move forward. God, just be with us as we continue on in this month. And Lord, I do pray for those who couldn't be here this morning. God, I pray for those who are sick and have illnesses. God, we know that you are the ultimate healer, and God, we do pray for healing in their lives. And God, I just pray that we would just go out and be the salt and light that you've called us to be. We pray it all in Jesus' name. Amen.